Queensland had been talking about bringing in a seller disclosure statement for quite some time. Essentially, it is attempting to align the Queensland property system more with New South Wales. Traditionally, it was on the buyer to do whatever searches and due diligence they want, whereas in New South Wales, the onus was reversed. The seller had to disclose pretty much absolutely everything about the property up front. Over the last decade or so, we've become a much more consumer-focused industry and society in general. It's moving to protect consumer rights, whereas bringing this in has made it more of a specific, understandable obligation around what it's fair for buyers to be told when they're buying a property.
In terms of what goes into a seller disclosure statement, like we got one the other day that was nearly 200 pages long. Like they're substantial documents.
And I think what we're seeing is people are either going either way. So there's a lot of under disclosure still happening, but on the converse, there's also now a lot of over disclosure where it's like, let's just put everything but the kitchen sink in it.
Agents are impatient beasts.
Yes.
You know,
I'm married to an agent, so I understand.
Well, welcome back to the Hot Property Podcast. Today, I'm sitting here with Peta Gray from Enterprise Legal and Better Lawyers Group as well. Thanks so much for coming on. We're going to talk about seller disclosure statements today.
Love seller disclosure statements, Jacob. Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Enterprise Legal and yourself and why you're here today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Managing Director of Enterprise Legal, which was a firm I founded in 2017. So we've just had our 8th birthday.
Wow.
Which is great, into our 9th year. And last year, Enterprise Legal became part of the Better Lawyers Group, which was a group I also founded because I acquired another firm called Donaldson Law, which is quite well known in town, from Adair Donaldson. So we've got the two firms running in one space at the moment, doing very different types of law. Yeah,
that's amazing. So tell us the difference between Enterprise Legal and Donaldson Law and how Better Lawyers Group sort of ties it together.
Yeah, so Enterprise Legal is our business and commercial firm. So our core client that we assist are business and property owners. So almost all of our clients are one of those two things. And we can help them with the full suite of legal services for those things. So business, employment, front-end disputes that arise in a business context, and then our property and construction services. So you've got your traditional conveyancing, but then things that are more complicated. We do a lot of complicated titling and fixing up crazy titling things that the titles office has done, and helping with, off-the-plan developments and things like that. Whereas Donaldson Law is a national firm, so we don't have any clients in Toowoomba, even though we're based here. And we work in a really niche but important area in advocating for people who've suffered historic child abuse and getting them redressed. So that's our main core areas down that. We also do a lot of work with veterans, so military compensation matters and things of that nature. So very, very different.
Wow, yeah.
And it can make for very interesting and diverse days, being the director of both of those businesses.
Yeah, no 2 days the same, I bet.
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. So this year we've seen the introduction of the seller disclosure scheme across Queensland.
Yes.
And that has created, I guess, more process, more compliance, more just something else to do for our clients as sellers of properties. And I guess you've created this amazing and efficient structure to be able to help our clients with that process to make it super easy, super seamless. But tell us about the seller disclosure statement and why that was really introduced and what that means for clients.
Yeah, sure. So Queensland had been talking about bringing in a seller disclosure statement for quite some time. So it had a few years, it'd been a few years in the making. Essentially, it is attempting to align the Queensland property system more with New South Wales.
Right.
So traditionally in Queensland, it was on the buyer to do whatever searches and due diligence they want to find things out. I mean, sellers have always had certain statutory disclosure obligations, as you know, but they were fairly limited as compared to those obligations in other states. Whereas in New South Wales, the onus was reversed. So the seller had to disclose pretty much absolutely everything about the property up front in a package. They don't call it a seller disclosure statement, but it's the same kind of concept. And then it was on them to disclose that to the buyer. So the buyer could really sit back and rely very heavily on that in New South Wales, whereas in Queensland it was the other way around. So the costs for those things were also reversed, which is what we're seeing with seller disclosure. It's putting more costs back on the seller, but reducing the cost a bit for the buyer.
And what is really the reason behind that? Is it just to make the systems aligned, and do you think that will then spread across other states, or was there a couple of examples where stuff wasn't disclosed that probably should have been? Or have you seen instances where clients have discovered things after the fact and after settlement that they're like, wow, if I knew this previous or prior to entering into a contract, I wouldn't have purchased?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main driver was, over the last decade or so, we've become a much more consumer-focused industry and society in general. And so it's moving to protect consumer rights in that it's easier in many respects for a seller who knows the property, may have owned it for many years, to tell the buyer about things that they might not necessarily know about, but that the law and, the pub test says that they should know. And, we've always had things like, the consumer law that's been in since 2010 to protect in terms of misleading and deceptive conduct and things like that. But I think a lot of those things are a bit toothless tigers or a bit vague, or what does that actually require or mean? Whereas bringing this in has made it more of a specific, understandable obligation, I think, on what is the accepted practice around what it's fair for buyers to be told when they're buying a property.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of what goes into a seller disclosure statement, like it's not just a title search and a survey plan and a dial before you dig. Like we got one the other day that was nearly 200 pages long. Like they're substantial documents.
Yes, that's right. And I think what we're seeing is people are either going either way. So there's a lot of under-disclosure still happening. But on the converse, there's also now a lot of over-disclosure where it's like, let's just put everything but the kitchen sink in it. And that can come with it its own challenges. One, as you said, it can be overwhelming to have such a long document, which might not have needed all of those things in it. And also they might be disclosing things they don't have to necessarily disclose. For example, the most obvious one being a flood search. So, which, there is a few weird or somewhat strange omissions from the scheme in that, flooding, especially in Queensland, southeast Queensland, is very topical and important. It's something that people really care about when they're looking at purchasing. It's actually not a requirement to put that in. So putting that in, it isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that's probably a decision for the seller to make as to, is this something that we want to share? Do we want them to have a look at that? You know, if the law doesn't think that it's something we need to be positive in giving, do we need to go further than that?
For sure.
Over-disclosure can kind of make people opt into things that they might not necessarily have needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking just before we turned on the podcast setup, but you haven't seen any terminations of contracts yet. We're a couple of months in now, so that's positive that this extra disclosure isn't affecting the sale process too much, but hopefully it's making it easier for consumers, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot that we could terminate under. There's been a lot of defective ones that we've received when we're acting for buyers that are just still largely incomplete or missing the prescribed certificate. So we've, obviously flagged that as a thing for the client that, if you do get down the track and, that's something you want to look at. But no, we haven't had anyone who's terminated yet. So that is good. But I'm sure it will come. I'm sure it will come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what does it mean for buyers? Like, is it saving them money on the conveyancing side of things with the searches that they previously would have done?
Yeah, I think it is. I think some buyers who are also, I think one of the biggest question we get when acting for buyers is what searches should I do? Unless you're a person who's bought and sold property a lot, you really don't know. Like you get a long list of searches from the lawyer because we have to give you them. Our insurer says we have to give the opportunity for everyone to order every single search. Think if you ordered every single search on the searches list for a property in Toowoomba, it's like $5,000.
Wow.
If you got every single one. So like not many people are going to do that and hardly anyone needs to do that. So we try to offer a lot of guidance around what we think you should and you shouldn't, or what we think you need to. I think what the seller disclosure's done is certain things say contaminated land where it very clearly says no, it's not contaminated. And look, most residential properties, unless they're starting to get into semi-rural areas, never, very unlikely to be contaminated. So I think it's helping buyers make more informed decisions about what searches they want to order and what they don't. And I think probably it's making sellers realise some of the things that are relevant. And so they're probably benefiting from that when they on-buy.
Yes.
Because they go, I've just disclosed that. Now I want to ask for that.
That's right.
Or look at what they write in the seller disclosure.
Absolutely.
So I think it's helping people turn their mind to the issues that it's raising.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that that you guys at Enterprise Legal have done really well and makes it very easy for us to send clients your way for the seller disclosure statement is how easy it is to start that process. It's not you've got to send an email or give you a call or, come in person, especially for, clients who aren't local, who they just want to say, hot property, what do I do? And we go, contact Enterprise Legal. Here's the form that you fill out on their new website that then just seamlessly flows. Tell us a little bit about that, and then the efficiency piece that you've created within your firm.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we knew it was coming in on the 1st of August, we sat down before then and went, okay, what are going to be the pinch points for agents, for sellers, for buyers? And how can we address those, and how can we create a product that's going to service the market? There hadn't been a lot of discussion within our legal industry about what those products might look like because the final details of what was going to be in the seller disclosure and what wasn't going to be, they swapped and changed that until right before they brought it out. So it was a bit of a fluid concept before then. So when we sat down, we went, well, obviously agents, they need it. They need it because when they have the first open house, you want to have it so you can give it to people at the earliest opportunity.
100%.
Obviously, you only need to give it to them before signing, but I think the earlier you can give it, the better.
And with the pace of the market, that's a pretty quick turnaround now.
Yeah, you haven't got weeks.
you can list and sell within a couple of days.
Absolutely. So you don't want to just put it up and go, oh, we'll get around to getting that from the lawyer soon. So we knew that people were going to want them quickly. We also wanted to make sure that what we see a lot, and even before seller disclosure, a great example being with the body corporate disclosures that it's now merged in, was people just didn't complete them. They just were largely blank. And I think people didn't even realise what that meant in terms of giving the buyers opportunities to terminate and things like that. And look, it's one of those things where thousands and thousands of contracts will go through and no one will rely on those termination rights. But if you're the person who someone does, you're going to be like, what? How come I didn't know this? Why isn't it being filled out? And I think similarly for some agents, not hot property, of course, who don't fill them out properly, I think they go, well, nothing's ever happened when I haven't filled it out properly until the day that it does.
Exactly.
And then it will be an absolute liability issue because obviously you've done it and you need to do it
100%.
properly.
Oh, we're hearing so many stories of agents trying to cut that cost down for their seller by doing it themselves. And, we've had the discussions internally and we continue to and fro when we cop those questions from vendors in particular to say, oh, well, so-and-so said that they're going to do it for this much and you're going to send me to a solicitor to do it. And we go, look, it's just not a risk that we're prepared to take as a business to, own that liability. But also, if there's something wrong and a buyer terminates under one of those termination clauses, they're going to be cranky with us, because we provided this, this service to them.
100%. And I mean, the Queensland Law Society recognises that it is legal work, so it is within our insurance policy. So then I think it's a bit unfair to expect agents to take that on board. And I also think it's unfair. I think some agents are putting it back on the client, the seller directly. I mean, a lot of clients don't even know what the word encumbrance means. So, I mean, how can you expect a client to meaningfully complete something?
Oh, that's right.
That they don't even know. And look, we are lawyers and we've spent a huge amount of time working out what goes in, what doesn't go in. No layperson should be expected to do that accurately,
Absolutely.
So the next thing we obviously thought was cost. Cost was going to be a big thing. It's a new cost, so it's a totally new cost for sellers. So it's always hard selling a new cost to the market. So we knew we needed to get the price point right. And for us to get the price point right, we had to be efficient. So otherwise, we have to charge too much if we're spending a lot of time doing it. So that really was where the online form piece came in, whereas our practice management system allows us to integrate online forms, which we use for a lot of different services within our business. We were building our new website at the time when this was happening. So we essentially just integrated that straight in so that people literally just need to click the button and you're filling out the instructions. So it was that very, avoiding having to ring up, having to wait for someone to ring you back, having to give details, get emailed a link. Maybe your email's wrong. Maybe it goes into junk mail, And meanwhile, the agent's going, have you done your seller disclosure yet? Because we want to get our listing up. So we really wanted that part to be really streamlined. And that's been working really well. So essentially you complete it all on our website. It sends us an email with the details. Our dedicated seller seller disclosure conveyancing assistant Chelsea usually phones everyone to just check, hey, you weren't just playing around with this, you actually want one. Prepares it usually same day or next day if it comes in a bit later on. And then we just send the invoice, and as soon as the invoice is paid, it gets sent by electronic signing too. So signing is the other part in that you can appoint an authorised representative being your agent or your lawyer to sign it, but the process in doing that takes just as long as
That's right. You might as well just sign off on it. And then again, and we've had clients who have asked us, will you sign that? Same with the old body corporate disclosure statements, will you sign that on our behalf? And we just go, look, as best practice for our business, we don't think that's the right thing to do by you as our client. We think that's it's the same as we're not going to sign the contract on their behalf.
Absolutely.
So why should we make other warranties on their behalf?
Absolutely. So, I completely agree. But unfortunately, not all agents are taking that approach.
That's right. Absolutely.
So we're very proud. We're very consistent with our next day turnaround at the moment. So
100%.
The only thing that holds it up is if people are a bit slow in paying their invoice, but people want it, so they're pretty good.
That's right.
And or secondly, sometimes if we need to order certain body corporate searches, they're the only ones really that can take a while to come through. So sometimes they take a couple of extra days. So we're encouraging agents to, if you're selling a body corporate property, get onto the seller disclosure even earlier than you normally would 100%. Just to allow for those couple of extra days.
And there's a lot of providers in the marketplace that are promoting a quick turnaround. And we have seen on the agency side where they haven't come with our recommended supplier in that respect. That it's really not as promised. But you guys have, hand on heart, followed through with a really quick turnaround, and it just makes our agents' lives easy. Agents are impatient beasts. I'm
married to an agent, so I understand.
They wanted everything yesterday, and everything's in a big rush.
What has the turnaround been that you've been seeing?
Well, sometimes the turnaround is like 14 days
plus.
Wow. There was a couple that we were really disappointed with. And I think it's because they're requesting them from, their family solicitor, whoever they've used for ages. And when you see the invoice, you go, oh my goodness, that's absurd. For starters. And then you go, and they took 14, 15 days to get it to us. And I just think it's because they don't have that process set up that you guys have obviously invested heavily in.
And there is a lot to it. So, I mean, I think it's one of those areas of law where if you're going to do it, you really need to have invested that time and energy in getting across it so you can do it efficiently, both from a cost and a time perspective. The one we've obviously seen it too when acting for buyers. We haven't seen 14 days. I think we've been out to about 10 on some of our
which is still too
ones.
long. Like you've got a buyer and a seller who are keen to transact. And then you've got this process that is just holding it up.
So what we've been seeing too is that some other agents of national brands and things like that, they've got directives from the brand or head office level that they have to do certain parts of it themselves or not externalize it to lawyers and things like that. So I think some of them don't feel 100% comfortable with that because it is putting a certain level of risk back on them. So again, I think it's really good that, independent agents like Hot Property are realising what is in your wheelhouse and what shouldn't need to be in your wheelhouse and working with clients to explain that.
And we just stick to what we're good at, which is talking to buyers, talking to sellers and, bringing them together to achieve, the best possible outcome for our vendors mainly. But, in an ideal scenario, we think that the vendor gets the highest price possible in the market and the buyer gets a property that they fall in love with that they really want. So,
absolutely.
And that they don't have to labour over, disclosures and, all this information. It should be honest, ethical real estate is what we should do. And then, the legal side of it should protect everyone's interests from that perspective. So.
That's right. And I mean, I think the other thing with disclosures and anything like that is that, there's certain agents who go, oh, we don't want lawyers over lawyering it. We don't want them holding the deal up. We don't, all those types of things. But it's much better, in my experience, to have everyone happy and that once the deal's signed, you can have a high degree of confidence that it's going ahead and nothing's going to rear its head and wreck the deal for either party. Rather than hurriedly get it signed and people don't really understand what they've signed up for. And then things come out and then, that ruins the deal later down the track.
That's right.
It's always, prevention is always better than cure.
100%.
It's always cheaper. It's always better for great interactions and experiences.
Exactly.
But I don't think everyone shares that view sometimes,
that's
unfortunately.
right. And from an agency perspective, it makes it so much easier to allow both the buyer and the seller to have a great experience dealing with our business.
Yes.
And also dealing with your business. But, that then means you've got a higher chance that when that buyer comes to sell again,
yes,
that they go, look, Hot Property really looked after me.
Yep.
They made sure that the paperwork was, the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed.
Yes.
And that was a great seamless experience for me.
Yes.
So I want that for the next buyer of my home, because I genuinely do think that, when you go to sell, you do want to sell your property to someone who really wants it and wants everything that you love about that property and the reasons that you bought it, to pass that on.
100%. Yeah, completely agree with that. Yeah.
So I guess, has there been any stories or anything interesting that comes out of this seller disclosure regime?
Interesting. Lots of anxiety around time pressures. We had one very anxious client who needed it, and we ended up finding out he wasn't even listing his property until the new year. He was very anxious.
Yep.
We acted for some clients putting their property at an auction with an agent, and we'd had it all prepared before went on to the auction marketing campaign. So this is at least a month out. So they were very organised. And then on the day of the auction, the agent rang us and said, "Oh, what am I doing with this?"
Oh no!
And hadn't been giving it out to all the prospective buyers.
Oh,
so that had all their best intentions, hadn't really gone to plan on that one. And then probably just some of the strange things people give us, they're trying to go, I want to give you everything, but just some very odd documents, history, their rates receipts for 10 years, proving that they've paid their rates, and, things of that nature. There's a lot of...
you've got to just go, wow, your internal household admin is impeccable. Like, I could not produce the rates. I couldn't produce the last rates notice, let alone
which many people
my rates receipts. I'd have to call the council. But that's very impressive.
So nothing too crazy yet, but just just some people doing some crazy things in what they're giving us. But
I bet. No, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Peter, for coming in, and hopefully this is a great resource that we can share with our sellers and our buyers in that respect. To really educate them on what this seller disclosure statement is, why it really is important, and that they can get some value out of this. So thanks so much for making the time to come in.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And look forward to doing more seller disclosures together.
100%.